All right, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. We are back again on the ROS Media channel. Welcome back. This is a follow-up to a previous conversation that Iain and I have had, where we began to unpack the claims that were being made publicly about Iain and the work that's being done here as well at the Republic of Old Souls. If you've not seen that interview, I encourage you to go to our ROS Media channel, where you'll see the Dan Neidle'S Malicious Assertions against Iain Clifford. That's part one. We're now on part two. So why are we doing part two? Well, since then, a number of new documents have come to light, okay, including forensic report, IRS-linked evidence as well, and formal legal actions now being prepared in the US. So at the center of this, there's a very direct challenge that's being made. Are these protocols fantasy, as Dan Neidle is claiming, or is there now verifiable federal evidence that tells a different story? So today we're going to go a little bit deeper into the subject matter. So Iain, welcome back.
Well, it's good to be here. I wish I didn't have to talk about these types of things, but I feel it's necessary because there is an information war going on, and unless we put our side of the story out there, then people are just hearing a very, very one-sided bullshit story, which is coming out of Dan Neidle. So yeah. Well,
let's dig into it. Let's talk a little bit about these fantasy claims, because one of the most direct claims that's kind of coming across here is that everything you're describing is essentially fantasy, all in woo-woo land, sovereign citizen bullshit, as they keep calling it, fraudulent. The list goes on and on and on, doesn't it? There's no real evidence of recoupments. And yet the new report that you've launched specifically references the wages and tax transcripts issued by the IRS, including a $4.4 million example linked to your trust. And just for the record, if you're watching, Dan, here's mine and my wife's recoupments as well. IRS verifiable transcripts. There's about $500,000 on here, and that's just two of many that we are in the process of recouping as well. So I think initially, what exactly is the wages and tax transcript? Maybe we could start there. Why is it so significant for people who are watching this? Are these just made up documents? Is this just theoretical, or is that an official federal record?
Well, as a result of the claims from Dan Neidle that I live in some sort of fantasy world, and everybody in the Republic of Old Souls, there's over 50 full-time contractors working on the project. Apparently, according to Dan Neidle, we're all living in a fantasy world where I somehow managed to wave my wand and put a spell over everybody so that they believe that these recoupments are real, with no evidence to back it up. Now, there's two worlds here. There's the world outside of Republic of Old Souls, which is the world of people that are not sure, the people that are listening to Dan Neidle, the people that are looking at Simon Goldberg and his RICO fraud, 1099 OID scheme. So there's the world outside of Republic of Old Souls, which is full of confusion, full of misunderstandings, full of propaganda, full of people like Dan Neidle, who's obviously been employed to continue a narrative, which we'll come back to in a moment. And then there's the world inside Republic of Old Souls, those that are actually seeing what we're doing, working on what we're doing and seeing the evidence. If all of these people internally that are working full-time in the organization thought it was a fantasy, that what I've come up with, it's taken me many years to come up with this protocol, the Clifford protocol, signature credit recoupment. If everybody internally thought it was a fantasy, I don't think that I don't think a lot of the people would actually stay with us if we're all working on a fantasy, and there's no evidence to back it up. I just don't think that people would continue with that, especially after the sabotage that happened in 2025 in September. If there was no evidence to back up what the people internally are looking at, then why would people stay? So that's a good question. I think that a lot of people need to dwell on that question. But let's go through. When it started off with Dan Neidle, he made these claims that I'm a tax fraudster. That's one of his claims. And he tries to label me in the same camp as Simon Goldberg, for which we're doing a webinar on this Saturday, and his 1099 OID RICO fraud scheme, and I'm unpacking it from A through Z this Saturday on the Saturday webinar. And the interesting thing about this is that I sent Dan Neidle a forensic report on why what Goldberg is doing is RICO fraud, and why a lot of people could get into very serious situation and have some very serious consequences by enabling Goldberg to file what he's filed, the 1099 OID filings, the way he's done it. And then I compared what Goldberg's doing to what we do, the Clifford protocol. And then I backed it up with all the forensic evidence of why the Clifford protocol is technically competent in every single area. And I've even gone as deep into right from the beginning of the process when you sign something, right? So that it doesn't mean that you have to get a pen out and physically sign a bit of paper, but the signature, which could be typing in digits in your phone, it could be typing in digits to move funds from one account to another, it could be signing digitally a mortgage or loan contract, whatever it is, it's called the signature. It doesn't mean a physical signature with a pen, but that activity, that event of signing something creates the credit. Now, once that credit is being created, there is a central system that tracks that signature energy, which is the credit. It goes into the clearing bank system. They deposit it into their system as a asset. So it's a physical deposit of energy. You can't obviously pick it up. It's not physical as in you can pick it up, but it's a ledger entry, as Professor Richard Werner writes about in his multiple research papers, of the banks are using that signature as a deposit. And this is where a lot of people get confused, because they think that a deposit is moving funds from one account to another. And it doesn't work like that. It is a signature that creates a negotiable instrument that the clearing banks take in as a deposit. It's not moving funds from one account to another account, which in people's minds is like moving a coin from one place to another place. That would be like giving somebody a coin or a note. That would be in people's imagination. That's like a deposit. You're making a deposit because you're moving something that already exists from one place to another. Well, in this game of the credit creation, this currency creation model, it is a brand new deposit that is being created from the signature. Now, a lot of people will be unaware of this. Even people that work in the banks will be unaware of this, that the IRS system already knows that that signature has created a deposit at the clearing bank level. That's the bank that you're doing your business with, getting your mortgage, your loan, your credit card, making a bank payment. And then that signature credit, which is now being converted to a liability, it's now a debt, is sold to an investment bank, and that activity is tracked and traced. so that the IRS, United States Department of Treasury, knows where that signature energy is, which investment bank security is that signature credit in. Now, in the last few weeks, I've been able to get a AI system to actually go and interrogate the signature credit creation deposit and track it through to the investment bank that is using it, that's renting our energy, as I've mentioned on previous interviews, and then is paying taxes on that energy, because that's what it is. It's a deposit of energy. Yeah. And the AI system has been able to track from A through Z, and I've put it all in a document which Dan Neidle has got. Right, I've given it to him. Now that demonstrates forensically, I could walk in a courtroom and I could put that evidence into a courtroom, and every single step of the process, if an AI can track it and do all that research and find it and track and trace it all the way through, how can it be a fantasy?
Yeah. It's got to have a literal point of reference, hasn't it, to be able to do that? Yeah. Now, your report goes further, because, you know, I've kind of held these up. You've spoken about your 4.4 million that you've spoken about to Dan Neidle, but the report goes further because it states that there's over 600 million in evidence. And I want to just touch on that, because this is important. You know, this is $600 million in IRS issued transcripts across multiple different trusts. I mean, what does that actually represent, based on what you've said about signature credit and the fact that you've done this AI tracking and tracing of the process from front to back? If we've got 600 million in evidence across not just one trust, but a multitude of trusts, what does that mean?
Well, what it means to me is that, you know, I've uncovered a system that a very tiny percentage of the world's elite bankers probably know about, and various other players in the elite sort of area of this monopoly board system. I've been able to uncover it, unpack it, and then get AI, because I interrogated it and because I know what I'm looking for and I know what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
I got an AI system to track and trace it all the way through, up to the point where the IRS is doing the same with their internal algorithmic system. And then once they've done that test and they've looked at it from A through Z, that's when they issue the wages and tax transcript to confirm that the grantor trust, which is operating as the holder in due course of the credit, as it confirms in the IRS publication 1212, has an entitlement, a lawful entitlement for the recoupment of the taxes that the taxpayer, which is the investment bank, has paid taxes to the United States Treasury, and the IRS's algorithm, which is called the 810 algorithm, has interrogated that credit, that tax, which is the original credit that was deposited, is now being matched all the way through the system, and the IRS now knows that that credit, that tax recoupment, now belongs to the grantor trust that filed the 1099 OID to correct the record, to divert the taxes from the payer, when the payer paid the taxes to the United States Treasury, and from the United States Treasury back to the grantor trust, where those taxes belong. Because that's what you're doing when you're doing recoupment, is recouping the taxes that ordinarily are retained by the United States Treasury as the bankruptcy trustee of the entire monopoly board. So when the IRS sends out a wages and tax transcript, they have done that check. They've got their algorithm to check that the claim that's being made by the 1099 OID filing matches their records. And then they issue the wages and tax transcript. And then following that wages and tax transcript, they are waiting for instructions. That's the IRS is waiting for instructions as to where to send that credit. So the wages and tax transcripts is not just some random, process that they guess. It's not a guesswork. It is forensically interrogated by their algorithm, and they've issued a wages and tax transcript. The very same wages and tax transcript which I sent to Dan Neidle, because I wasn't going to send him wages and tax transcripts for hundreds of the ROS members, what was originally Matrix Freedom members, because they're private.
Yeah.
And Dan Neidle knows that. Yeah. So I sent him my one for the trust that I had set up as the grantor, $4.4 million. I sent it to him. I explained what it was. And I've even done a video where I've broken it down about what it is and why it's reliable evidence of recoupment.
Mm. Now, you mentioned a minute ago about trusts as well, and I think that this is a fundamental part of this too. The actual role of the trust structure itself. One of the distinctions in the documentation is that between filing as an individual versus filing through a 98 series international grantor trust. Why does that difference matter?
It's a huge step in the process that if you don't get it right, that's where people get frivolous filing penalties. They get potentially they might get a recoupment and then have it drawn back from them. And or worse, if it's part of a scheme where there's lots of people doing it collectively, which is what Simon Goldberg has been doing, the administrator stroke promoter of that kind of a process could actually go to jail, as has happened in multiple cases, which I'm going to be talking about this Saturday.
Yeah.
You see, this is quite difficult for a lot of people to get their head round, right? The monopoly board is artificial. The living man or woman cannot step on the monopoly board. So if you picture an artificial monopoly board, think of it like a hologram, you're looking at it, but if you put your hand on it, your hand is going to go straight through it, yeah? You can't step on it, you can't rest on it, you can't sit on it, put your hand on it, or physically move anything around on it. But what you can do is you can put a new piece on that monopoly board. That, if you think of it like a hologram, you're putting a new holographic piece on that board, and that is a grantor trust. Now, because you are the birth certificate construct, which is also an artificial piece on the monopoly board, has created a grantor trust as the grantor. Now, here's the key difference. It's so significant. When your mum and dad registered the birth certificate construct, the event created a trust. And in that trust, which a lot of people think is a treasure chest, and they think it has got this hidden wealth in it, and you can somehow access your treasure chest of birth certificate wealth and all this nonsense, right? It is a trust where there is joint beneficiaries to that trust. The cabal, the state, is a beneficiary of that trust, as is the living man, woman, the baby that becomes an adult. There are two beneficiaries in that original trust. The birth certificate construct is a trust. Yeah, it's an artificial piece that sits on the monopoly board, but there are two beneficiaries of that trust. The actual birth certificate construct itself is registered into the system as a debtor. The national insurance, social insurance number is a reference number for a debtor. So if you file a tax return, a 1099 OID claim from the position of being a debtor, where there are two beneficiaries of that trust, one of which is the cabal, and you've never corrected the record because you've left that birth certificate construct the way it was created, and you've never corrected the record, and because the living man woman has been operating using the name of the birth certificate construct in fraud, identity fraud, using the name on the birth certificate as if it were their name, the family surname, the whole of that birth certificate construct is operating in fraud as a debtor. So if that is the standing of the piece, that artificial piece sitting on the monopoly board, which it is, and then that artificial piece sends in a 1099 OID, claiming that there is abandoned energy owed back to it, where it's operating in fraud, because it's using the name on the birth certificate, holding itself out is the terminology in the law. It's holding itself out as if it were that entity, which it's not. The living man and woman is not that entity, and it definitely isn't that name. And it's been registered into the system, this artificial system, as a debtor, where the predominant beneficiary of that system, of that artificial construct, is the very same cabal that the taxes are being paid to. It has no standing. It has no claim. However, if the grantor sets up a grantor trust where the sole beneficiary of that trust is the living man or woman, there is no contamination of fraud. There's nothing going on other than that grantor trust can now operate as the holder in due course of the credit, as a nominee representing the living man or woman as the beneficiary, the sole beneficiary, or if it's not the sole beneficiary, the predominant beneficiary of that grantor trust. That is a clean structure, artificial structure, as a nominee that can operate internationally, can file a 1099 OID, can make a lawful claim to be the holder in due course of the taxes that the payer, which is the investment bank that is renting the credit from the original deposit, it's now lawful. And the IRS system can see it because they know that it is a grantor trust that has been established with a separate tax reference number, which is the EIN number. It's not operating under the Social Security number or the ITIN number or any other tax reference number. It's not linked to the social insurance number, the NI number, the SSN number, anything like that. It's separate. It has been established as a nominee for the true creditor. The true creditor is the living man or woman, the signature. You can't, an artificial construct can't sign. It can't pick a pen up, but the living man or woman can.
So this is more of a doorway than an entity that's filing for itself. It's not filing for itself, is it? We've kind of described this as the doorway between where we stand as the creditor, as the signature bearer, the issuer of the signature, as a living man or woman, versus the artificial construct of the monopoly board and the pieces that are on there. Like you said, you can't step on it as a living man and say, hey, that belongs to me, but you can put another piece on the board that is acting as holder in due course on your behalf. And that opens the door between what is living versus what is not.
You see, the birth certificate construct, an artificial player piece, acting as a banker under the Bills of Exchange Act 1882, has made a deposit of energy. The signature is the conduit of the energy transfer from the living man woman through the birth certificate construct, a banker that is making a deposit, issuing a security promise to pay in the future. That has no entitlement, no lawful standing to recoup that signature energy back to the birth certificate construct. So if you're going to recoup abandoned signature credit energy, which is taxes, you have to put a new piece on the monopoly board that is clean, that can operate as a nominee, as it says in the IRS publication 1212. And if that entity, which is an artificial entity as a grantor trust, files a 1099 OID, it is making a claim that the signature, the creator of the signature, the living man woman, is the true beneficiary of the taxes that are being paid at the moment to the United States Treasury. On their ledgers, they are keeping those taxes, whereas they actually belong to the signature, the creator of the signature. The living man woman who is not on the monopoly board, cannot go on the monopoly board, but can recoup the signature energy, not back to itself, because a living man woman actually can't spend credit, but their grantor trust can. In exactly the same way that the living man woman can't spend any money, credit, currency now. It's only the birth certificate construct that can issue deposits, get involved in debt, take on, contracts, sign any, get involved in obligations, in taxes. It's all of that stuff is artificial. It takes a long time to get your head around how they've tricked us all, right? The living man woman can't spend anything, can't actually physically can't use money. There is no money. All that you can do is put another piece on the board and move that piece around the monopoly board, which is why monopoly is such a good analogy for this. You're just putting another piece on the board that has the standing to recoup the taxes that are already on the board and use them without constraint lawfully. Whilst the birth certificate construct is separate and has nothing to do with this. After the deposit was made, now it's down to the separate grantor trust as a player piece to lawfully recoup that abandoned credit energy, which is tax, and use it through a trust structure that can now spend and recoup it, separate from the birth certificate construct, which doesn't get involved in that. Doesn't need to be involved in that.
No. And this is fundamentally where people are getting in trouble and getting it wrong, aren't they? So maybe we could just dig into that as a comparison then. You've explained the right way to do this. Let's look at the way people are doing this. Why does filing under a personal identifier like your SSN number, why does that trigger all of these issues? It triggers refund freezes, it triggers all sorts of different things, doesn't it?
Well, people that don't understand how this system works, which is, the overwhelming majority, massive 99.999% of people that have looked at this subject do not understand it.
No.
Because if they did, they would be doing the Clifford protocol. They would be, because it's the only way you can get this to work.
Yeah.
So I know that people don't understand it, because if they did, there would be loads of people out there doing it.
Yeah.
There is a tiny, tiny percentage of people that are, I believe, doing it. And they are the ones that are never going to tell you what they're doing, right?
No.
They're the privileged few that are never going to tell you. And people like Dan Neidle are a million miles away from that elite group. A million miles away from them, right? So when I came across, I had all the pieces, and it took me a while to put them all together, to figure it out, and then to interrogate it, which is what the AI system has done. You can't go to AI and say, I want to recoup signature credit. Can you map out how to do it? Because it's going to tell you it's a fantasy. It's going to tell you it, which is where probably Dan Neidle's getting it from. It's going to tell you if you do it, it might be unlawful. You might go to jail. It's all a theory. There's no evidence to back it all up. I mean, if anybody wants to verify that, just if you've got access to any AI, just put in there, I want to recoup abandoned credit through 1099 OID, and see what it tells you.
See what it comes up with, yeah.
But you see, the AI systems don't want you to know how this works. You have to know more about it than the AI system is going to tell you before it will reveal that actually what your knowledge of it and your map of how it works is correct. But it's not going to tell you that. Well, if you just go to your AI and say, tell me how to do signature credit recoupment or abandoned credit or 1099 OID, it's literally going to come straight back to you and tell you that it's a myth, it's a theory, and worse than that, if you try and do it, you might end up with a frivolous filing penalty, or worse than that, you might go to jail. And then most people would go, well, I'm not going to go any further with this then, am I? Because it all looks like it's illegal.
Yeah.
And I'm going to walk away from it very quickly. But if you do what I did, which is to break all the components down and then get it to agree with you that each component of this process has standing in its own right. Yes. And then join all those components together. Now it can't tell you that what it's just told you is untrue, yeah? No. If there's 10 components and you get it to tell you that each one of the 10 components is verified and it's got standing on its own and it all checks out as an individual component, if you then put those components together in a process, the AI can't come back to you and say, well, actually, I lied to you. These individual components don't do what we've just agreed that they do. Mm-hmm. That's how I got it to tell me. And then I went further and I said, well, if the IRS has got a system that tracks the credit, if they've got an algorithm, the 810 algorithm, if they've got a system that tracks that, there must be other database systems that can track it. Yeah. Find me the other systems. That's where my research, one of my many research reports came from. So you see, when Dan Neidle wants to say that what I have come up with is a fantasy, what he's really saying is that the AI system that I got to verify, the process that I'd already mapped out, is the AI system also a fantasy, Dan Neidle? Mm. Interesting. The very same system that tells you, if you just go to it initially and ask it to give you a report, will tell you can't do it, it's fraud, it doesn't work, it's a theory. The very, very same system is verifying everything I already told it and showed it, and then going further than that and actually finding the signature credit that's gone all the way through the system. And I can ask it now to tell me, as I did this morning, NatWest Bank, one of the biggest UK banks, where they are a particular council, Coventry Council, uses NatWest Bank to collect the council tax. Tell me, where does that council tax deposit signature credit end up? The Bank of New York Mellon. And it can tell me all the journey. So is that a fantasy, Dan Neidle? I don't think it is. Why would an AI make all that up, when the same AI would tell you that it is a fantasy, unless it knows that you know that it's not a fantasy?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest confusions is the 1099 OID itself as well for a lot of people, because as you said, I mean, I watched that interview the other day, and Dan Neidle was very, very adamant that it's only for the US and it's only for a specific type of filing, and you can't use it in the UK. So let's just touch on that for a minute as well, because he's saying that it's being misused, which we know it is. People are using it incorrectly. But your position is that when you look at what's defined, and you've mentioned IRS publication 1212 specifically, the report explains that the IRS runs this matching system, that there is the 810 algorithm. So there's cross-checking against bank records. Maybe for people who are just watching this for the first time, I know this is a deep subject, and we've done Infinite Money interviews together where we've got into this in a lot more detail. But in terms of how that works, from what is clearly documented in the IRS's own publication, Article 1212, how does that work? The matching system, the 810 algorithm, and the cross-checking against the bank records, just because this is clearly a journey and a process. It's not just you put a piece of paper in and you get a check. It doesn't work like that. So could you just maybe break that down a little bit for us?
Well, people like Dan Neidle, you see, who would look in the mirror and think that he's really smart, right? That would be his reflection of his image in the mirror when he's looking in the mirror in the morning. He has convinced himself that he's very smart. Why? Because he's been on all the courses. He's been promoted up through the Magic Circle law firm, which I say is a privileged track that he's been on, because he's been sponsored all the way through, because I've done a bit of research on how he got to the head of tax at Clifford Chance.
Okay.
So he has been living a journey, a 20+ year journey, because he's in his 50s. So he's been on a 20+ year journey at Clifford Chance, where everybody around him is looking at him as if he's really smart, right? So he has convinced himself, based on the courses he's been on, based on the people around him, based on his whole network of elites in the UK, that look to him as if he is an expert. He's now being interviewed on channels like this Mind of Steel channel. Yeah. He's put himself into this position where he thinks he's smarter than everybody else, which you can obviously tell when you listen to him.
Mm-hmm.
That's his self-image, right? He's way too smart for the average guy. Yeah, he's way too smart. That's why he's doing his philanthropic tax policy associates, non-profit, philanthropic, expose the fraudster type platform. I've never heard Dan Neidle say he's got something wrong yet. No. I've never heard Dan Neidle say, well, you know what? There's quite a few things out there I don't really understand. No, according to Dan Neidle, he is like an expert of experts, right? Certainly on taxes. So he makes these statements about 1099 OID can only be used in the US, and it's only for investments where you've made an investment in a security, and you've paid taxes on that instrument, and you're due some of it back.
Yeah.
And what he's telling you with that narrative, with that explanation, is true, right? He's not lying. That is 1099 OID, one use of 1099 OID, the only use of 1099 OID that he learned about in his various tax courses. Now, being a UK tax lawyer, he won't be coming across very many people filing 1099 OID in the UK.
No.
Remember, he's a UK tax lawyer.
Yeah.
Right? Who claims that he's an expert on United States taxes, the Uniform Commercial Code. They don't use the Uniform Commercial Code in the United Kingdom.
No.
So he's talking as if he's an expert on a subject that he isn't an expert on. He's never done a course on it. Even if he had done a course on it, it wouldn't tell you what we've just been discussing, because it isn't in any courses.
No.
It just doesn't exist. Why would they tell you how everybody can recoup signature credit as taxes? Why would they tell you that? Why would they publish that course that's going to tell you that? They're not going to publish it anywhere, are they? No. And they're going to leave. And it was very interesting. I was listening to an interview yesterday. It was an interview in 1992 where the guy being interviewed is predicting the Iran war that's happening right now.
Okay.
Very interesting interview, right? Now, he had triangulated all sorts of information, which is all out there. And the theme of the interview was, if you want to know what's going on, go and have a look at all the information which is out there, right? But how many people do? Very, very few people actually look much further than what's on the news or what's on the TV or what's on the internet, right? But this guy in 1992 went to look for all sorts of information which is publicly available and put it all together and triangulated it and joined all the dots together, right? A bit like David Icke has been doing, right?
Yeah.
That's what I did. All the information that I've put together is all publicly available.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to join it together. You've got to be able to remove this programming that things work the way that they tell you in the courses. I did tax courses in the 1990s. And if I just relied on that information, I would be the same as Dan Neidle. Oh, well, the only way you can do 1099 OID is if you're in the United States, if you've bought some securities and you've paid some taxes on them, and you're due a return or a rebate or a recoupment because you've overpaid taxes. There's some withholding tax that is due back to you, which is what the majority of people would say the 1099 OID form is for. But they don't tell you what I had discovered in any course. But the information is there, but it's not there in a book. It's not there in a guide. It's not there so that you can just read a pamphlet and then you figured it all out. It's the same as the guy in 1992 who predicted the attack on Iran in 2026 in February, even got the month right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Because it's been written down somewhere that's what their plan was, right? So in the same way as that, he discovered that, I discovered signature credit recoupment by joining the dots up, by taking all the evidence and being able to understand what things mean. And this is where my brain is different from a lot of other people's brain. I actually know what things mean. And that's the difference between my brain type and other people's brain types. But I can't play instruments or sing I can't do all those things that others can do, but I can see what things mean, and I can see how they join together. Now, I don't know what brain type Dan Neidle's got. I don't think he's got my brain type, because if he had my brain type, he might stop for a moment and think, maybe it doesn't work the way I was taught.
Yeah.
See, my brain would say it doesn't make sense what I'm hearing. What I'm reading about the conventional 1099 OID doesn't make any sense when you add into the equation that Professor Richard Werner, the Bank of England, is telling you that credit is created from the signature.
Mm.
It doesn't make any sense that the only way you can recoup your withholding taxes in the conventional way, the 1099 OID, is if you're in the United States and if you've bought some investment securities and you've paid some withholding taxes on them. How can that be the case if credit is created ex nihilo, out of nothing? How could it? It doesn't make any sense. So if you've got my brain type, you're going to go, well, that doesn't make sense. Let's go and look into it.
And question that. Yeah.
Question it. So you see, Dan Neidle's frame of reference is what he's learned, right?
Yeah.
It's not forensic. He hasn't done a forensic research on it. He only knows what he's learned. He hasn't questioned what he's learned to be true. Now, there's a theme with Dan Neidle, right? So if you look, just indulge me a moment, right? If you go on the internet and put in Iain Clifford or Iain Clifford stamp, you're going to get 4 pages of narrative that Iain Clifford is a sovereign citizen. Iain Clifford is a free man on the land. Iain Clifford is a fraudster. Iain Clifford is in exile because he's on the run.
Yeah.
Right? Now, is that not the same as Dan Neidle saying 1099 OID is only possible if you're in the United States, if you've bought some investment securities and you've paid some withholding taxes which are due back to you, and you can file the 1099 OID? Is there not a theme there that this guy looks at the very surface of the information, doesn't drill down into it, doesn't interrogate it, doesn't question it, just accepts what he's being told by some other entity, whether it's the internet, whether it is his professor in his courses he went to, whether it's his colleagues that he surrounds himself with, all these different high and mighty elites that he's got all around him. None of them actually know how it works, but that's his frame of reference. So when Dan Neidle is looking in the mirror, he sees a guy who's very smart. He sees a guy who has been advising top tier companies and very powerful and wealthy individuals on their taxes. And he would never question the course that he went on 25, 30 years ago. He would never question the internet. He would never question that what he's been reading might actually be false information. Whereas I do. I always question it because I don't trust what is out there on the internet. I don't trust what's in books. I don't trust any of these things because I came to the conclusion, and maybe he would have come to this conclusion if he'd had the same journey I'd had. In 2010, when they destroyed my financial services organization, if that doesn't start to get you to think about what the fuck is going on here, why are they doing that? Maybe if he'd had his world destroyed in 2010, maybe he would ask a few questions about what's going on. But if you look at our pathways, you look at Dan Neidle's pathway and my pathway from, say, let's go back to 2001, 25 years ago. I signed a joint venture with Halifax Bank of Scotland. Now, 25 years ago, Dan Neidle would have been, I don't know, it would have been 30 maybe. He was probably just beginning to get his feet under the table at Clifford Chance, right? So if you do this journey I've got a joint venture with HBOS, and he's just taken a job at a big law firm, right? And then he's fast-tracked over the next X number of years and becomes the partner of this law firm, which is a magic circle law firm, one of the biggest and most prestigious law firms in the UK, with billable, that's how much they bill people, off the frigging chart, right?
Yeah.
And I've got a joint venture with a bank with an unlimited credit line, right? Which is unheard of. And then they have set me up as the patsy to go and promote this credit line all over the UK, which is what I did through all my wealth management firms that were distributing my arbitrage investment programs called Maximizer. And then we get to 2010 and they destroy my organization, whilst at the same time, Dan Neidle is being promoted.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's the pathways, right? Now I start to question what's going on. And when we get to about 2015 and I read Professor Richard Werner's papers on how the banks are creating ex-Nihilo credit, and then I know that the financial elites and the regulators had destroyed my firm because the HBOS had provided a credit line to the investors in my arbitrage programs and then stole all the assets.
Yeah.
With using ex-Nihilo credit creation to do it.
Yeah.
I started looking into it because I didn't want to accept that. It just felt like it's a fraud. There's something badly wrong with this. So I started looking into it in 2015, 11 years ago. Whilst Dan Neidle is carrying on his pathway of becoming a partner of a magic circle law firm, and all of his frame of reference is everything that he's learned is true. He's used it and it's all worked out. He's being paid millions and millions a year as a salary. He's getting partnership bonuses. He doesn't want to challenge what he thinks he knows to be true because it's paying him a fortune. He's being held up on a pedestal. So he's never going to challenge what he thinks is true. Whereas I've had my organization destroyed, my reputation destroyed, what other people have said, my genius undermined. I'm going to challenge things as I already had done, which is why I got the joint venture with HBOS in the first place. So there's two very different pathways, very different mindsets, very different brain types, and who is right and who is wrong. And I'm going to let the audience decide that.
I want to touch on the sabotage event that you mentioned as well, because I do think that has some significance here. And I know we've mentioned it before, but just in brief, one of the most serious claims is what's described as the September attack. And that involved over 3,000 identity theft filings, didn't it? I mean, just in brief, what actually happened there?
Well, just to complete this, this 1099 OID, because I didn't quite complete it. Can you file 1099 OID from the United Kingdom as a debtor? The answer is, yeah, you can, but it's not going to probably end very well for you, right?
It's not, no.
So if you're Dan Neidle and you label what we do with what Simon Goldberg does and say it's the same thing, now you can say that's a fraud, it doesn't work, look on the internet, people go to jail, blah, 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 right? But he doesn't go on to say, but it looks like Iain's method is different from Simon Goldberg's. He just labels it as the same.
Yeah.
And if you watch the video, or if you can bear to listen to this clown talking, which I'm struggling with just recently, you would think that what I'm doing with the Clifford protocol is the same as what Simon Goldberg is doing, because there's no breakdown of the differences, and then there's no narrative, there's no debate, there's no discussion about the fact that every single deposit that is made in a clearing bank is securitized, and that securitization happens in the United States. And because it happens in the United States, where all the investment banks are, which in our journeys, Dan Neidle is unlikely to have ever worked with any of the US investment banks because he's a UK lawyer.
Yeah.
Whereas I did securitizations with the investment banks in New York. I've been to most of the banks in Wall Street. So you see, I already knew that the investment banks have got securities in them that originate from other countries. Whereas Dan Neidle may or may not know that. So if you make a deposit in a bank in the UK or Canada or Australia or New Zealand or somewhere else or anywhere for that matter, you make a deposit, get a mortgage or a loan or a credit card, Dan Neidle doesn't appear to know that that is going to end up in a securitization vehicle, in a investment vehicle in New York. He doesn't appear to know that, or if he does know that, he's being even more lacking in integrity by not confirming that. So when he says you can't do it because it's only in the US, he's missing out a massive piece of the jigsaw, which is all these deposits of energy end up in the United States. Why would they end up anywhere else when the United States Treasury is the bankruptcy trustee for the whole monopoly board? Why would they end up anywhere other than New York or in the United States? He doesn't talk about that, does he? No. So and then the last piece of this, right? I won't get too deep into it. When you make a deposit, the issue price is zero. When you buy a security, the issue price is going to be a lot more than zero.
Yeah.
When you discount something that costs nothing, the original issue discount is very high. The future value, when it costs you nothing to create it, the discount from what could be an infinite value in the future back to zero is pretty high.
Yeah, it will be.
Whereas if you buy an investment security for $1 million and then you claim that it's worth more or less than that each tax year, and you've got to pay taxes on it, which is the withholding tax, which is what Dan Neidle's talking about.
Yep.
That's a completely different kettle of fish.
Yeah.
So he doesn't talk about the issue price being zero, because in his world, how could you have a security with an issue price of zero? Would be impossible, but not with ex-Nihilo credit creation. It's not. I'd love to debate this guy.
Yeah, that's quite significant. That is quite significant when you think about that. So moving on to the September attacks.
In all my research papers, which he's got, and it's interesting that he stopped focusing on the technical side now. It's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna talk about that in a little while, because I'd spotted that as well. So I want to just touch on the September attacks just briefly, because we're talking about 3,000 filings here, aren't we? Identity theft filings. I just want to talk very briefly about what happened, how that triggered this system-wide freeze as well on verified recoupments, and whether you believe that was just a random event, whether it was a coordinated event, what exactly was that? Because I want to bring that into the frame of the legal escalation as well, because it's important. It's part and parcel of that. So if you could just briefly touch on that, please.
Right. So in order to understand this, if this was like a play and you went to watch it, you're sitting in the theatre and you're watching a play, right? You've got to understand who the characters are. You've got to understand what their agendas are, what their motives are, what their fears are, what their desires are, right? Like you would do if you went to watch a play or a movie or anything else, right? If you don't understand who the characters are, what's going on with them, what they're trying to get and what they're trying to avoid, then this doesn't make any sense, right? So think of this like a play where you've got some characters, and they've all got a different role to play in the play, right?
Yeah.
So you've got you've got Amy Sanger, who is at the time and has been for a long time the fiduciary of the Matrix Freedom Reserve, which doesn't belong to the Matrix Freedom members, but it is a reserve that is being used as and when necessary to underwrite and underpin the costs, because the organization has got a large cost to finance.
Yeah, operating costs are large.
Yeah, there are sometimes gaps in how much is coming in and how much is going out. So Amy Sanger was appointed as a fiduciary to look after the reserve that ultimately belongs to me. Well, it belongs to trusts that I am the beneficiary of, right? So I've said this, it's not, I'm not going to disguise it. It's nothing clandestine going on. That's just the reality of it, right? At the same time as Amy Sanger is appointed as the fiduciary to look after those funds that are held in trust, she is also personally $650,000 in debt, not on a mortgage or a loan that she's funding, to her family, to some very aggressive creditors that are threatening to literally come and harm her unless she pays back the 650,000, which is a number of different creditors. Right? She had kept secret. This is her secret. Nobody outside of her close circle of family and friends probably knew that she had this range of debt. So she is terrified of the creditors coming round to her. She ran some sort of trailer park that she ran. She's actually buried some of the things that she's bought with the credit so that they can't find them. This has all come out later, right? So the character of Amy Sanger is deeply in debt, is terrified of the creditors getting hold of her, and trying to get her, squeezing her for the repayment of the debt, right? At the same time, Amy Sanger is the head of the Department of Trustees. There's 36 trustees that are operating as trustees for 3,000 grantor trusts. So you've got 3,000 trusts, 36 trustees. So just round it up, round it down. There's 100. There's 100 grantor trusts per trustee. It's easy numbers, right?
There or thereabouts.
There or thereabouts. Now, all of those trustees, if they were all in the play, in the movie, they are also expecting their signature credit recoupment, because they're all in the program, right? Now, if you want to steal nearly $1.5 million that is being held in trust structures, and you're Amy Sanger, and you want to use that to pay off your debt and give you a surplus, if you then imagine that the information that you're looking at Dan Neidle's blogs, which are all over the internet, which are saying that Iain Clifford is a criminal. Iain Clifford is a tax fraudster. Nothing Iain Clifford's ever done works, which is all the narrative that you're going to be reading about if you're reading Dan Neidle's blogs. He's one of the most highly respected lawyers, tax lawyers in the United Kingdom. So he's not a random blogger with some crazy narrative that hardly anybody would believe. He's got a lot of credentials, right?
And a huge following,
and a massive social media following, right? So if you're Amy Sanger and you're looking for a way to steal $1.5 million with no comeback on you, you would wait until the FCA have convicted Iain Clifford Stamp in July, the end of July 2025. Because now Iain Clifford is now verified on the internet with the documents a criminal. And you've got Dan Neidle, who's been saying it, and Iain's a pseudo-law, sovereign citizen tax fraudster. So you've got that reference, and you've now got a sentence. If you're Amy Sanger in the play, this is the character that she is playing out, right? Now, if you want to completely undermine the whole Matrix Freedom's 3,000 grantor trust, because you want to wipe the organization away, right? You want to completely destroy it so that nobody can come back on you. Iain can't come back on Amy Sanger in her mind, in her character, because he's a convicted criminal. How is Iain going to sue her in the United States if he is a convicted criminal? So she can steal the reserve, and she believes in her character, in her script that she's reading in her part in the play, that she is untouchable. Now, she doesn't want to disadvantage the 36 trustees who are all expecting their signature credit recoupment, but she's learned how to do signature credit recoupment from Lisa Griffin, who used to be the head of the department, the tax filing department, who'd learned it all from me, who was doing signature credit recoupment herself against the contracts, in breach of her contracts, and had just had a result. Had actually recouped her own abandoned credit using the Clifford protocol to do it. So if you're Amy Sanger and you've got access to this method that Lisa Griffin has proven works because she's had her result, and you can use that method to give it to all of the trustees, the 36 trustees that are all expecting their own signature credit recoupment. And if you are Amy Sanger and you can get access to the electronic filing license that files the 1099 OIDs, if you've got the methodology, which you've got from Lisa Griffin, if you've got access to the tax filing software, which is a license which you can only use if you've got the right license, ERO license to use. If you think you can steal $1.5 million, but there's no comeback from Iain, that's what you believe if you're Amy Sanger. If you can give all your trustees that are in your group, because you're the head of the group, you can give them their signature credit recoupment by using the electronic filing software, which they all did. And if you can, in the bargain, destroy Matrix Freedom by cancelling all of the recoupments, by filing fraud identity reports, believing that there's never going to be any comeback because Iain Clifford is a criminal, convicted criminal, according to Amy Sanger. That's what her frame of reference says. You've now got a scenario where you can conduct, if you're Amy Sanger, in her mind, you can conduct a perfect crime. You can steal 1.5 million, believing there to be no comeback on you. You can undermine all of the Matrix Freedom recoupments because that destroys the organization, and then nobody else is going to come back to you and challenge you. And you can still provide the recoupment of signature credit to all of your trustees that are in your private group, because you've got access to the know-how and you've got access to the tax filing software that will make all that possible. That is exactly the character and the role that Amy Sanger was playing. And that's why she did what she did, because she thought she could get away with it, looking after the people that she knew the best, the US trustees, looking after herself. By the way, she could get her own recoupment of a signature credit as well, obviously, whilst everybody else loses. And then she can join together with others and say, well, Iain's a fraudster, isn't he? And Iain's this fraudster criminal that I had to move away from him because if I'd stayed working with him, I could have gone to jail. That is the character that Amy Sanger was playing out up to September of 2025. And then since September 25, because the whole of her belief system has been dismantled with great big doses of the truth and reality, probably more than she can bear. that the trustees that she was looking after have disbanded, that the electronic filing officer, who I call WK in all my documents, has filed a fraud report with the IRS, naming Amy Sanger, naming Lisa Griffin, naming Marilyn Prospero, naming Mark Gobriel, naming Janet Ball, naming a whole bunch of other people, having used his license without his authority, having a case being filed in the New York District Court in New York to investigate who the $1.5 million belongs to. Does it belong to Amy Sanger? Does it belong to Iain? And then you found out that the IRS are investigating and the use of the ERO's license, which Amy Sanger would have used, all the other people would have used it without the electronic filing officer's permission.
Without WK's permission,
WK's permission, which is a federal crime.
Yeah.
And now
that's an interesting point, Iain. I just want to, just for a second, I just want to put a pin in that and rewind back to the 600 million evidence. Because these two kind of intertwine here. If you think about that, why would someone with an impeccable reputation like WK, why would they make that kind of federal level filing if the underlying data wasn't real?
Well, they just wouldn't. I mean, if you've got an electronic filing license and you are what's called a tax preparer, that is the term that the IRS give you. It's a position, a tax preparer with a license that is doing tax preparing work. Why would you partner with the Clifford protocol and a bunch of people that are filing via the Clifford protocol if you thought it was a fantasy or a fraud?
Yeah.
And then having had it all destroyed because of Amy Sanger's identity theft reports that she filed, after that, then file yourself with the IRS as a licensed tax preparer with the IRS, pointing out where the fraud is. Why would you do that? If you thought it was a fantasy, if you thought that there was no merit in the Clifford protocol, if you thought that you were going to personally get yourself into deep trouble, why would you put your name on a investigation report and send it into the IRS and get them to investigate it if you thought it was a fantasy?
Exactly. That just kind of, that was just a penny that dropped for me there as well, going back to the actual evidence, and that you've got Dan Neidle'S saying that's just fantasy. You know, this 600 million, it can't be possibly real. There's so many other moving pieces to this whole equation in terms of people and characters, like you've mentioned, you know, not just Amy Sanger, but including people with impeccable track record and reputation like WK that are pivotal in what's been going on here as well. So let's talk a little bit about the actual escalation then, because if we've got this sabotage event that we've just discussed, you've also got, to some extent, you've got the public narrative as well, because that is just, it seems to be unchanging, doesn't it? You know, that you've got all these documentary, all this evidence that's been put, a ton of it in front of Dan Neidle. And yet, regardless of what you've put in front of this guy, I'm lost for words in terms of the fact that he isn't acknowledging any of it. He isn't looking into any of it. He isn't questioning any of the evidence that you've given him. Because you're saying in the documentation as well that the public commentary from people like Dan Neidle is just ideological cover, is the way that you describe it there, for the sabotage that's taken place. I mean, do you believe that this narrative that's being pushed publicly, do you feel that has had, within the bigger picture here, do you feel that's had real world consequences?
Well, I have to say that I've been very disappointed with human nature, the human nature of people like Dan Neidle for a long time. I've experienced so much dishonourable behaviour since 2008, really. It's off the chart. It's all in my documentary. There's a website just going live, which I think you're going to show soon, which documents some of the things I've experienced. From over a 25-year period, I've experienced people like Dan Neidle, an abundance of people like Dan Neidle who just lie. They do not tell the truth. When it comes to me, they might tell the truth in other areas. They might do. And I'm sure if you looked at Dan Neidle's website and he's investigating different people doing different things, I'm sure that some of those things he's investigating are probably true, right? And he probably is being truthful, and he probably believes what he's creating on his website to be true. But when it comes to me, what happens, and it's happened for 25 years and more so in the last 16 years, is that there is the truth and then there is the propaganda narrative.
Yeah.
And the propaganda narrative never goes away. The propaganda narrative is that Iain's an idiot, Iain's a fraudster, Iain's latterly a pseudo-law sovereign citizen, free man on the land. Iain can't write. Iain is somebody who spends all of his time seeking out fraud schemes that he can prey on the vulnerable, take their money away from them, never have any good intentions to do anything other than defraud people. And that is the propaganda narrative, which you can download from multiple sources on the internet. So it's got to be true, right? But then there's the truth, which is the diametric opposite. It's the polar opposite of who Iain Clifford really is and what he really does. And the fact that he is a whistleblower is the pivotal truth and reality that the majority of people do not understand. Have no comprehension of it at all.
No, because they're seeing the narrative that's being pushed. So on that note, if you are watching this, if you want to have some real context behind what's going on here and what has been going on for a mighty long time, then I would encourage you to go and visit Iain's website, iancliffordwhistleblower.is. This is what you will find. And there'll be a ton of information on here. This is being built out as we speak, but we would still encourage you to go and have a look. It's not complete yet, but there's still information on here that will start to paint a very different story for you based on 16 years worth of attacks from somebody who has had, again, prior to that, an impeccable professional career in the financial services industry and in those markets, has built groundbreaking systems and technology and products across decades. So have a look at this, guys. Okay. iancliffordwhistleblower.is. And I would be very curious to know what your thoughts are, having seen the truth. So going back to that sort of role of public narratives, let's talk about how this is escalating at this point then, because we're now seeing this is moving into formal legal action. There's two major cases here that are being prepared, aren't there? There's one personal, there's one institutional as well. Can you explain what those are?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that you see, when you research what Dan Neidle's platform does, his non-profit tax policy associates platform, Dan Neidle has made so much money in his career that he can now offer his blogs and his analysis and his research for free, right?
Yeah.
And if anybody wants to sue Tax Policy Associates, they will find out it's got nothing, because it's a non-profit platform, right?
Yep.
And let's suppose that you actually have a case to sue Dan Neidle for something he said about you. Dan Neidle will then go to the British courts and say it's in the public's interest to know about whatever it is he's saying. And he gets something called a SLAPP order, SLAPP.
Yeah.
Which means that the damaged party cannot take a case up against Tax Policy Associates.
Okay.
And he's used this defence, there's two layers of his defence, a number of times. More recently, with an 8 million claim against Dan Neidle, who criticised somebody, a tax barrister, who tried to sue Dan Neidle for £8 million. And the Dan Neidle only recently, and within the last 2 to 3 months, got a SLAPP order preventing the guy who lost 8 million from suing Dan Neidle in the UK. So this is the strategy, right? If you are working for the cabal, the elite, and you are Dan Neidle, and you want to attack people, knowing that they can't come back at you, in a similar way to Amy Sanger thought she was invincible and nobody could come back on her, Dan Neidle has got that belief as well, right? Which is why he operates with so much hubris. He thinks he's in his castle, surrounded by his moat and his alligators, and he can do and say what he likes in his castle, and nobody can come and get him. Which is why he behaves with so much hubris and so extreme levels of arrogance.
So talk to me about the actual claims then, because we've got the OSN Foundation claim alone. That's 120 million in damages linked to interference with that 600 million in recoupments. Yeah. And then you've also got the jurisdiction side of things as well, which I really want to dig into here because that's important.
Yeah, the problem Dan Neidle has got is that he's only ever offended people in the UK, right?
Yeah.
And his narrative and blogs are only normally about people in the UK. So if you're in the UK and you're on the other end of Dan Neidle's blogs and his websites and his posts, etc., you're not going to be able to sue Dan Neidle in the UK because he's going to get a SLAPP order stopping you from suing him, right? But he made a fatal error. He made lots of them, actually. His fatal error is he didn't do any research on matrix freedom and the membership being international.
No.
And some of the members are in the United States.
Yep. We have quite a few US members.
The damages that have been caused to the members who are now envoys, members of the Republic of Old Souls, which is a United States ministry, for which Iain Clifford is the head minister. So now you've got an international scene going, you've got an international playing field now, not a UK playing field where he can stop you from suing him with a SLAPP order. And even if you succeeded, you can't sue a non-profit platform because it hasn't got anything.
Yeah.
Right? So, because Dan Neidle is lacking in his skills of research, or doesn't think he needs to do any research because he's got hubris, massive hubris, he didn't realize that the damage that he has caused through his blogs caused Amy Sanger to take the action that she took, which is to undermine all of the 600 million and more recoupments by filing fraud identity reports, on the basis that her justification for that is Dan Neidle's blogs. And some of those people who lost their recoupments operate in the United States. And all of the grantor trusts that filed for those recoupments are in the United States because they all have US EIN number.
Yeah.
So now you've got damages which are going on in the United States, right? And then you've got one lead claimant against Dan Neidle that he doesn't even know it exists because he doesn't do research. You've got the OSN Foundation, which is a Panama foundation that I established to finance the Freedom Plan and the sovereign nation of Republic of Old Souls. And that nation, that foundation was due to get 20% of the 600 million as its financing share of those recoupments, and it was going to use that to finance the independent sovereign nation of Republic of Old Souls and all of the Freedom Plan, which Dan Neidle doesn't know about.
No, he doesn't.
Know about it now, but he didn't know about it before because he doesn't do research, right? Because he thought he was untouchable, right? Al Capone thought he was untouchable, went down for tax fraud. It's an interesting story. So there is a case that will be served on Dan Neidle very soon, where the lead claimant is OSN, the foundation that was contractually entitled to $120 million that would have received from 600 million of recoupments. It actually was due more than that because there was a lot more going through in the pipeline than 600 million. That's just the confirmed amount, right? So that is a claim, and in the law, that type of claim is called vicarious liability, and tortious interference. Dan Neidle's blogs tortuously interfered with all of the contracts between the grantors, the grantor trusts, and the OSN nation, OSN Foundation as the financing entity for the nation. When you interfere in a contract, that's called tortuous interference. Tort, damage, wrong. So you're interfering in a contract, causing harm to the parties within the contract. That is tortuous interference. And you don't have to be in the United Kingdom to be able to take a claim out against Dan Neidle, who is in the United Kingdom. And his medium of damage is the internet. His medium of damage is his blogs, which you can read from anywhere in the world. Specifically, in this case, in the United States, where the grantor trusts have an EIN number, where, strangely enough, and the irony of this is, there's many, many ironies here, that Dan Neidle confirms on his blogs and on his interviews that you can only file 1099 OID from the United States. Well, that's the very same place where the lawsuit is going to be structured. Because the lawsuit plaintiffs are the 1099 OID trusts that owe 20% of their recoupments to the Panama Foundation. So if you're watching this, Dan, which I'm sure you will do, you've already confirmed on your Mind of Steel blog and interview that you can't file 1099 OID from the UK really, but you can file a lawsuit in the United States when all of the parties are in the United States, apart from Panama, which can sue internationally and have the case heard in the United States. So that's case number one, right? Now, case number two is even more interesting, or it is to me, because case number two is there is malfeasance in public office. So that is the FCA, that is the courts, that is the Treasury, the United Kingdom Treasury, that is the Bank of England, that is all of the regulators that should have stopped the banking fraud that I blew the whistle on in 2008, 2009. It's all in my documentaries on that website we just looked at.
90 billion.
If you then wind the clock forward and miss out everything that went on from 2008 to 2023, just ignore all that for a moment And then you have the FCA with their entrapment by design narrative and plan and playbook, where they invent a prosecutor, Alistair Mackenzie, who's a fictional character, where they invent an investigation where there is no investigation, where they invent that they've served all the documents, which is the writs, warrants, and orders of the court case, and you haven't served them lawfully. But then you manage to railroad a conviction against Iain Clifford Stamp, the birth certificate entity, where Ian, the man, is the agent for it, liable to go to jail. So when you get to July of 2025 and there's a 12-month jail sentence, and if you have been involved in that malfeasance in public office, which is what is going on here and has been going on for a long time, in all different events that have happened prior to that, if you are marketing that on your platform and you're Dan Neidle and you keep repeating it and you get people to believe it, that Ian's a criminal. Yeah. And if people turn away from Iain and what Ian's doing, and if that causes damage to people that are relying on Iain and his knowledge and his research, that is also tortious interference and more importantly, vicarious liability. Now, what does it mean? So the FCA they're quite clearly, and all the evidence points to the fact that there's malfeasance in public office. That's bad behavior. If you don't know what malfeasance means, it means very, very bad, dishonorable behavior for a public body, which has been proven over and over and over again by all different research reports on how the FCA conducts itself. It's not just me saying it. There's a whole bunch of reports, the APPG report, Andrew Green's report. There's a whole list of reports that have been written about the conduct of the Financial Conduct Authority. Malfeasance in public office, hubris, fraud, forgery, it's all in there. It's all in the research reports. So if you are Dan Neidle and you have been employed by the FCA as their agent, as their media agent, to pump out narratives all over the internet that Ian's a fraudster, he's a pseudo-law nutter that practices as a sovereign citizen and a free man on the land, he's only interested in defrauding you, and by the way, he's a criminal, according to the Order 34/2023, Dan Neidle's then become the agent for the FCA. And if you want to, which I do, sue the FCA, if I tried to sue the FCA in the United Kingdom, the case would be railroaded. You'd never get anywhere. They'd probably counter-sue me and try and get damages out of me, or slap one of these civil constraint orders back on me, which is what they did in 2024. So that you can't even take a case on in the UK. Yeah, they've already done that in 2024. So you've got little or no hope of ever winning in the UK against the FCA, which is again why they do what they do, because they think that they are impenetrable. They think that they are above the law and they're being protected by the law. So if you're in that position where you're above the law, or you think you are, and you're protected by the law, you can do and say whatever you want, can't you, if you're the FCA? Which is exactly what they do, right?
What they are doing,
Exactly what they have been doing since 2008 in relation to what they've been doing to me, right? Which explains why they behave the way they do. But if you change the venue and take that case into the United States, this is case number 2 now, you take the case into the United States because the head envoy, the head minister of the Republic of Old Souls, is having his religious beliefs infringed and damaged by Dan Neidle, who is an agent for the FCA. In a venue where the FCA don't have their friends surrounding them who's going to protect them. in Wyoming, where there is no slap order potential, because many US courts have slap order. You can get slap orders in many court venues, right? In many jurisdictions, but not in Wyoming.
Wyoming's not one of them. Okay. Now, you mention as well in that documentation something called the Calder effect test as well.
Yeah.
Sort of essentially bringing in foreign actors into a US jurisdiction. How does that work in simple terms?
In simple terms, you have to demonstrate that there are damages in Wyoming. You can't say there are damages in the United Kingdom and you're going to take the case into Wyoming and try and get a judge in Wyoming to hand down a damages claim in your favor. You have to demonstrate that there are damages in Wyoming or in the United States.
Okay.
Well, that's easy to prove because all of the grantor trusts were established with EIN numbers.
Yeah.
And the tax filing license holder is in the United States.
Yes.
And some of the members who were expecting to get their a share of that 600 million are in the United States.
Yep.
And the internet is available in the United States.
Yep.
And that is the Calder test.
Okay.
Can you transfer the damages to the United States? I say you can on every single level.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Wyoming doesn't have a slap order. You can't get a slap order saying, oh, well, you know, this is all for the public benefit, this information that Dan Neidle's been putting out there. Because in the United States, there is the freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
But in Wyoming, if there is damages being caused in a Wyoming courtroom, they don't look at the public benefit of the information. They look at the torts. They look at the evidence. They look at the substance of what's going on here.
Yeah. And
then the most inconvenient thing for Dan Neidle is that he has said on multiple occasions that Iain Clifford is a tax fraudster, meaning the 1099 OID scheme.
Yeah.
Which I can forensically evidence on every single level is not tax fraud. It's the complete opposite.
And have done.
So for the first time in Dan Neidle's career, it's my guess that he might be a little bit worried.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that, because I think one of the strongest parts of all of this correspondence is the fact that he hasn't taken any of it into account. You know, you've mentioned there's this accusation within that of willful blindness, as you put it, that all this evidence that's been presented, all the forensic research that's been presented, it's just all been ignored completely. You know, so the argument's being made there, isn't it? That it's not just a misunderstanding anymore, is it? Let's be fair. You know, this is about knowingly, purposefully maintaining a narrative. That's how it looks.
Well, you see, for a lot of people, they'll find this very, very difficult to accept, right? But I've lived through this for 16 plus years. You would imagine that if you put all the evidence down on the table, you wrote it all down, you could prove everything that you're saying, and you put that in a courtroom, you would probably believe, if you're in the majority, that a judge would look at all that evidence and say, well, on the weight of the evidence, I can see it's all true. I'm going to go with the weight of evidence and the facts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think if you asked people, the majority would say, well, that's of course what's going to happen, isn't it? But it's not been my experience.
No.
Integrity Financial Solutions, the firm that I spent my entire 7 days a week working round the clock building, an award-winning firm, was taken out of the game. And when I tried to bring justice into that equation, all of the evidence was ignored by the High Courts. not by a magistrate who's a milkman in the morning and a magistrate in the afternoon. No, by high court judges.
Mm.
And then you take it into judicial review, which is a review of the decisions made in the high courts, and then that's railroaded and scrubbed from the record. So you see, I kind of got used to the fact that it doesn't matter what the facts say. It doesn't matter what the truth is. All that matters is the narrative and the propaganda and the agenda that the elites in the United Kingdom, operate within.
Yeah, and they're pushing. Yeah.
And if you're Dan Neidle and you're going out to lunch with all those same people that have been operating this propaganda agenda, thinking that they are untouchable, because this is the problem. If you read all of the reports that I have done that, on all the reports that on the HBOS scandal, on the banking and the 90 billion, on the public inquiries and all the investigations that took place into the insolvency of HBOS, there's one theme all the way through it. No one at the top of the system has ever gone to jail. Not one of the main players that were the movers and shakers, the powerful ones at the top, not one of them has ever done any jail time. No. When the fraud has been proven, the malfeasance is proven, the facts point to it on every level, and still not one of the elites has gone to jail. And that should tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah, 100%. So what does this mean now, do you feel, Iain? I mean, when it comes to everything we've spoken about over the past 2 episodes of this entire fiasco that's been going on, if the transcripts exist, which they do, if the filings exist, which they do, you've got legal action now underway. I mean, what happens next?
Well, a pivotal aspect of this whole story is what's going on in the UK Court of Appeal. It's very, very pivotal. It's a tipping point, actually. Mm. So let's just unpack what I mean by that, right? So you've got the FCA Order 34, 2023, which I say is an entrapment by design, which was completely ignored in Southwark Crown Court. All of the evidence was ignored, railroaded through, judicial review of it railroaded through, public inquiry denied, complaints to the JCIO, which is the regulators that sit above Southwark Crown Court, rejected.
Yeah.
Every single thing that you would have expected that the judiciary and the elites and the hierarchy would have taken notice of and reversed a obvious fraud was all rejected.
Yeah.
Railroaded and rejected, right?
Yeah.
So that's the background, right? Now, because I will never give up unless somebody comes and takes me out of the game or kidnaps me and takes me away somewhere. The problem that these guys have got is I'll never, ever give up, which is why one of the reasons why they're worried about me, I think. Because most people would have gone away a long time ago by now.
Yeah, they wouldn't have endured that for 16
years.
Sure.
Right? They just wouldn't have stayed the course, right?
No.
Because they probably would have thought, well, as many as the majority of people that have ever looked into this have said to me, Iain, I don't know how you keep on doing all these things. I would have given up years ago and just gone and done something else and forgotten all about this, right? But you see, the problem that they've all got is I actually do believe in integrity, right? That's why I called my financial services firm Integrity.
Yeah.
I think it matters.
Yeah,
I think that a world with no integrity is not a world I want to be in, right?
No.
I don't want to be in a dystopian world full of liars, cheats, and pirates. I want to be in a world of honourable people, right?
Yeah.
So you see, I care about that, and it's a principle for me. And that's why I don't give up. It's nothing to do with getting any money. I can give a fuck about getting money. It's about principles, right?
Yeah. No, I believe in integrity. I understand that. Everyone really should be doing the right thing, regardless of who's watching. Even when no one's watching, you should just do the right thing because it's the right thing to do,
I absolutely know that many people committed suicide when the bank foreclosed on the maximizer investment range. People's lives were ruined.
Yeah.
People's marriages broke up. People took their own lives. I carry that around with me. I didn't cause it.
No.
You know, if I hadn't have done the joint venture with HBOS in 2001, it wouldn't have happened.
No.
I didn't do it knowing that all those things were going to unfold from that moment forward.
No.
I did it because I thought it was a great deal.
Yeah.
I thought it was a major opportunity for me to expand my abilities and bring some solutions in the market. I didn't know it was going to end up with those kind of consequences. So what's going on in the Court of Appeal is this. I set the FCA up. I served notices on them. It's called the Wininski principle. I did a load of research on trying to see where the FCA's Achilles heel was, right? Now, I'd already served all these things in the Southwark Crown Court that Alistair Mackenzie didn't appear to exist, proved to me exists. Nobody did. So I already knew he didn't, right? Because they never proved it, right? That's before the sentence. It's before the judgment. I sent notices to the court, Southwark Crown Court, and the FCA proved to me that Alistair Mackenzie is a real prosecutor. Those notices were ignored. Yeah. So I already knew then. It was easy for them to prove that the guy was real, if he was real, yeah?
Well, surely.
But they didn't. Yeah. And, you know, for those people who are watching this, you think, well, what difference does it make? It makes a huge difference, because the only way that case could ever be taken into Southwark Crown Court is if you've got a bona fide, officially authorised prosecutor working for the FCA. Yep. If the guy doesn't exist, if he's a phantom, he's a fiction, it's just a name on an email, that isn't a case. There is no case, just for that one point alone, right? Yeah. Forget everything else. On that one pillar, right? So I challenged them before the judgment in July 2025, and I challenged it when the sentence was handed down, and they never replied, neither the FCA or the Southwark Crown Court judge. So I already knew that it was that their case, they had no substance on that one point, right? But then what I did was having taken the case to the European Court, and it was then procedurally rejected 5 times in a row. Wow. On procedural grounds, not on the substance of it, procedural grounds. I already knew that the FCA had lobbied the European Court and nobbled them so that they wouldn't take the case in. All right? So I had to find a way of challenging it that was lawful, that the Court of Appeal in the UK had to take notice of. And I found something called the Wininski principle. Okay. I served notices on the FCA challenging them to prove 3 things. Alistair Mackenzie, show me he's real. Show me that you actually investigating evidence that belongs to me, documents that actually belong to me. Yeah. Knowing that they don't. 45,000 documents they claim they're investigating that do not belong to me, and I've put them on notice before that these documents don't belong to me, and then prove to me that you served the writs, warrants, and orders on a registered address that actually belongs to me, knowing that they can't do that either, right? Yeah. So on all 3 levels, they cannot prove anything. They're completely hollow. They have no substance. They're the emperor with no fucking clothes, right? So I sent notices to them under the Wininski principle. Okay. I gave them a number of days. I gave them, I think, 21 days to prove any one of those 3 things under the Wininski principle, which is a principle if there's been a conviction and you challenge the lawfulness of the conviction under the Wininski principle, the party bringing the conviction has to prove that they've got a case on all those 3 levels, right? In the context of what I've just explained. What did the FCA do? Ignored the notices. They couldn't reply under the Wininski principle. They've got no evidence.
How can they? Yeah. How can they provide evidence of Alistair Mackenzie when he doesn't exist?
No, how can they provide any of those three things when they already know that they don't have them? Under the Wininski principle, they chose not to reply. They chose to remain silent. Now, if they remain silent under the Wininski principle, you can draw what's called an adverse inference.
Okay.
So this isn't, people in the street won't have a clue what we're talking about. But if you're a judge and you understand the law and you understand the Wininski principle, you will know that if the party that is being set to prove those three things, i.e. the FCA, doesn't prove them, you can draw an adverse inference, meaning there is a negativity about that. They've been given a challenge, they haven't risen to it, therefore there must be some weakness in their side of the argument, right? That's an adverse inference in the law, right? So we then get to the early part of January 2026, I should say, and the Court of Appeal reject the case that I had served there. This is the highest court in England, right? In England, you can't go any higher, right?
No.
They reject the case on procedural grounds, the same as the European Court, on procedural grounds, right?
Okay.
Their excuse was that Iain Clifford was not a qualified lawyer and therefore could not submit the case because the case needed to be submitted by a qualified lawyer.
Right. So what happened to being able to represent yourself then?
Well, the procedural grounds were bullshit. Because I already knew that I can send a case into the Court of Appeal as a pro se litigant, a litigant in person, representing my own interests, which I did. So I complained to the Court of Appeal that their procedural grounds to reject the case were unlawful.
Okay.
And it hadn't been rejected by a judge. It had been rejected by a clerk, not a judge.
Okay.
They used a clerk to reject the case. If the case is going to be rejected, it has to be rejected by a judge. They tried sneakily to reject it from a clerk, thinking that I wouldn't realize and I would go away. But I didn't go away.
So where are we now with that?
So I put it back in there, and then it went completely silent for 56 days until I served further notices on the Court of Appeal, reminding them that they have an obligation in the law to put the case in front of a single judge. And I quote all the law on why that is, right? By the way, Dan Neidle, it's not pseudo law, it's actual law. Because I can read law and understand what it means, right? So I put that back in after I waited 56 days and nothing happened, right? So they are choosing to go silent, because if you think about it, which I'm sure some people will do, this will be a case that will be written up, right? This will be another one that's in the case precedents. I've already got two, one in Ireland and one in the UK, already major case precedents. This will be another one. The three options that the Court of Appeal have got. Number one is to put the case in front of a judge, and he has to review it. And if he doesn't find in my favour, then he's being unlawful, and that will be challenged by three judges. And then it will be challenged in the United States, and then it will also be challenged back in the European Court with a much more simple, narrow focus on that one decision, not on all the 16 years of history, just on one decision, right? So they've got that choice, which is the choice is the lawful choice, right? Is to put the case in front of a single judge. If he's acting lawfully, he has to annul the sentence, strike it out, remove it. That then causes a claim against the FCA and others for malfeasance in public office.
Yep.
A claim that would be very, very embarrassing for the establishment in the UK, that could potentially unravel and unwind all of this propaganda that they've been spinning against me for 16 years. Not only against me, but also could unwind all of this bullshit that they've covered up in relation to the 90 billion of bank fraud that I blew the whistle on in 2009.
All those years ago. There's some huge ripple effects to this, isn't there? Yeah.
There's some big skeletons in their cupboard that they don't want to open that door, right?
Yeah.
Because they've already rejected my case a number of times before and treated me badly as a whistleblower, right?
Yeah.
So the judge has got a major dilemma, hasn't he? If he upholds my case, the FCA and all the others lose. If he doesn't uphold for me, he knows I'm going to appeal it and then take it to the US and take it to Europe. So what's his choice? He's got choices to uphold it, choices to reject it, or choices to do nothing. So what choice has he gone for? Do nothing.
Nothing, I would imagine.
Yeah. Which is exactly what's going on at the moment. As we are now. Nothing's going on, right?
Yeah.
But I got news for the Court of Appeal, is that up until this Friday, if still nothing goes on, then I'm going to file in the US and I'm going to file in Europe. So, and then it's going to be the Court of Appeal is malfeasant and acting unlawfully, because there is rights in the law. Everybody has the right of a trial. Everybody has the right to put their case. If they've been convicted,
a fair trial,
of a 12-month custodial sentence, which is where I am at the moment. Right? If I hadn't have been ahead of the game and come to Indonesia and then come to North Cyprus, I wouldn't even be doing this right now. I'd be locked in a cell for 23 hours a day with no computer and no lawyers. So that was their plan. But I've thwarted their plan because I already knew that was their plan from the beginning. You've got to know your enemy. If you're going to win a war, you might lose a few battles along the way, but if you're going to win the war, you've got to know your enemy.
Yeah.
And I know my enemy because I've had experience of them. And Dan Neidle, you see, he fits right neatly into the same lack of honor, lack of integrity, being protected by his friends with huge hubris, who thinks he can get away with anything and there's never going to be any comeback. And that is Dan Neidle's Achilles heel. Hubris.
Well, it's a fascinating story as it's even unwinding right now as well. I think for the people that have been watching the first episode plus this one, I hope that gives you a lot more context in terms of what's going on. Clearly, Iain is on the offensive here, and for a very, very good reason too. So, Iain, I appreciate you coming on board again and just sort of walking us through what's been going on more recently. Lack of response from Dan and from the courts and everything else in between. I mean, in terms of final thoughts, people watching this, trying to make sense of it all, what would be your sort of concluding words to those people?
Well, I've got three things to say, and I'll say them quickly, right? The first thing is the truth always wins in the end.
Yeah.
And if we don't believe that, then we might as well just give up now. I mean,
Stop
go
now.
And get just give up, Because if the truth never wins in the end, then what's the point of doing anything? Right. If the darkness is always going to win, what's the point, right?
Yeah.
So I believe
join them, as they say. You might as well, hadn't you?
I was offered to join them. If you remember, I was offered to join them and I chose not to. And then look at the consequences of not joining up with them, right? I could have easily joined them, and I wouldn't be sitting here having this interview now if I had done. Who knows where I would have been if I had joined up with them, right? But So that's the first thing. The truth always wins in the end. And I firmly believe in that, right? Because if you don't believe in that, what is the point of anything?
Yeah.
If you want to live in a world of lies and deceptions and pirates and you know, and deception and all that kind of thing, then good luck to you. But I don't want to live in that world. I want to avoid that stuff. I want to live in the truth, right? Because the truth is very important to me, right? And that's the first thought. The second thought is that the membership of the Republic of Old Souls, I believe, would be quite upset if they came and took me away.
Yeah.
And I carry the burden. It's not really a burden because it's not, that's the wrong word. I don't carry a burden. I carry a responsibility to deliver to those who've trusted me.
Yeah.
Because when someone trusts me, I don't let them down. It's not in my character to do that. I actually do care about what other people get out of this, right?
Yeah. I know.
I care more about that than I care about what I get out of it, which is very unusual because most people only care about what they get. I've never been like that. And there's a very deep spiritual reason for that, because we're all one. So how can you not care about others when they are you? Yeah. And the third thing the third part of this is that there is at the moment a massive spiritual battle going on. This war, everything that's going on, there's a huge spiritual battle going on between the light and the dark.
Mm.
And if you look into history, if you believe anything in history, which most of it is bullshit, there are tipping points in history that take things down a pathway. Is like a tipping point, a crossroads. Things go in one direction or another. I believe that this battle, this war that is coming to a head right now, is a tipping point.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be a tipping point for everybody. I'm not suggesting it's everybody's tipping point, but it's definitely a tipping point for those who've joined the Republic of Old Souls. Because those guys have joined and stayed with us because they resonate on the same frequency that we're on, that you are on, Andy, that I'm on, that everybody's internally working away at this. Yeah. We're on this frequency, and for us, it's a tipping point, yeah? So we ain't going to lose it,
for sure. I think that things have gotten incredibly difficult over the past few months. I think that everyone's feeling it. Everyone's feeling it. And I'm not just talking about feeling stressed or feeling under pressure. I think everyone's feeling it spiritually, emotionally. There's a lot going on right now, that some of which you can't put your finger on, you can't explain, but there's definitely a big shift that is about to take place, for sure.
The light needs a victory.
Yeah.
The darkness is getting too many wins. It's uneven, it's unbalanced. We're due a victory for the light side. And if this is it, and the people who care about what Republic of Old Souls celebrate a victory against the darkness, then maybe that's the tipping point that will bring a huge numbers of others that are seeking that truth and that frequency of integrity, honor, and doing it the right way and doing it for the benefit of the group and the community. Maybe this is the tipping point. You see, the universe is very good at bringing you stuff all the time that challenges the fuck out of you.
Yeah.
But it does it for a reason. And I think maybe this reason will be revealed because maybe this is the tipping point. Maybe this case gets won. Maybe Dan Neidle loses. It's not about the money. I mean, the money is important for the building of the community, right? And building of the freedom. But it's more about what's right and wrong. That's what this is about. It's what's light and dark, what's right and wrong. That's what this is about. And on that platform of right and wrong, no one's ever in all of time ever going to be my intention to sort this out. I am unstoppable in this because I'm tapping into an energy that's unstoppable. Not me, not the physical man that you're looking at. I'm tapping into an energy that is unstoppable, that wants to win us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very powerful.
And that is within the organization as well. You know, I feel it. My wife and I feel it definitely. And I hope that you that are watching this are beginning to understand the bigger picture here behind what we're doing. You know, we have spoken about it, but a lot of people get lost in the financial side of what we're doing here, the recoupment. And we get it. We understand that that is part and parcel of this, but it's so much bigger than that. It really is. Recoupment's going to mean nothing. Sooner or later, recoupment's going to mean absolutely nothing because it's not going to give you a life of freedom. It's having the right infrastructure that's going to give you a life of freedom. And I know that this is something that you've been battling for years against the cabal for the last 16 years, but it's not just battling against, you know, Order 2023. It's battling against everything else that's coming, isn't it? We know the agenda that's upon us. We know this 2030 agenda. We know the transhumanism. We know all of these other elements that they're bringing in, the digital ID, the 15-minute cities, the CBDCs. It's already starting to take place in other parts of the world. So we're making plans now because we need to be making plans now. Otherwise, it's going to be too late. So if you think that recruitment's going to save you, think again. Recruitment is a vehicle to at least get you maybe out of a bit of a hole or get you positioned financially where you can start to use that currency wisely. But if you choose not to use it wisely and think that you can just frivolously spend and recoup year on year on year in that endless cycle, you're going to reach a point where you're not going to be able to do that anymore. And then what are you going to do?
Yeah. It's a war. It's a war for freedom. That's what the war is about. That's what this is really about. It's a war to keep some freedom and to expand freedom. That's the war. And that's why I do this 7 days a week, because I'm not going to be spending 7 days a week working on a business to earn some money. I can earn money and I could do an hour a day and earn more money than anybody could dream of. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm doing it for freedom. That's why I've got so much energy and passion for it, because I know what it's like not to have your freedom, right?
Yeah, clearly.
I've lived through it for a long time. So I have experience of what it feels like, and it's only partially what that they've done to constrain me. But if you multiply that up by what's coming, why would anybody want to put up with that? It's freedom. That's the passion. That's the energy behind this.
Well, I hope people can start to feel that, and I hope for you, if you're new to this and you're watching, I hope you resonate with that as well, because that's exactly what the Republic of Old Souls is about. It's about creating a pathway to freedom from where you're at to where you ideally want to be. It starts with financial abundance, yes, but ultimately we're talking about freedom from the problems that we see in the world, having freedom to be able to make your own choices when it comes to what you eat, when it comes to your health, when it comes to how you live, when it comes to how you travel. So many different areas that we want to make sure people have the ability to make those choices wisely and freely. So Iain, again, thank you for jumping on, walking us through what we've been looking at today. I mean, this clearly kind of takes this conversation over to another level. I feel it's gone from theory and debate into evidence, process, legal action as well. So I love the fact that you're on the offensive with this. And as always, we encourage anybody that's watching this, look at the information, ask intelligent questions, do some real research, deeply examine the context and the facts that are out there before jumping to conclusions based on surface narrative. So I appreciate you all for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. Have an amazing day. And as usual, we will see you, no doubt, back here sometime soon for the next one. Bye for now, guys.
Bye for now.